All right. Archive 3, The Great Pyramid of Enoch. Writing on the wall. At Ukazan in Syriad, before the flood, the Sethites erected the Gizian monuments, covering them with texts of the wisdom, discovery of their time, and the knowledge of astronomy in the future. The Great Pyramid was a type of time capsule that protected and concealed an advanced yet original theology that was taken for granted by mankind in the antediluvian civilization. Upon the colossi were placed writings ordained by the Creator, given through Enoch for the purpose of surviving the destruction of the world. These were the secrets of the distant past, the present, and the worlds to come after the deluge, and far beyond, even into the years of the apocalypse and millennial epoch. As the largest book in the world, it has remained virtually intact even 48 centuries after its construction. The Greek and Roman historians, geographers, and writers 2,000 years ago and before perplexed over these monuments, gigantic works in the desert of Egypt. Many of them left to posterity their observations and writings. Their findings greatly contribute to our understanding of how the Great Pyramid originally appeared before it was defaced. By the testimony of ancient writers, the lower portions of the structure were covered with millions of tiny inscriptions that by the time of the Greeks were already impossible to translate. Most of the information we have studied concerning the writings up to the faces of the Great Pyramid have come from Hebraic, Egyptian, and various other traditions, but they are made believable by their correspondences, and we are not without substantiation from even more credible authorities. As far back as 440 BC, the Greek historian and traveler Herodotus of Halicarnassus eventually wandered into Egypt after traversing the Near East. He sought whatever knowledge he could gather from the antiquarian priesthoods of Egypt. It was there that he, in awe, beheld the majesty of the Great Pyramid. The account of his visual scrutiny of the edifice conveys that the casing stones were polished and white and covered in writings. He marveled at these casing blocks were perfectly fit together and polished. 1. Herodotus wrote that the joints between the casing stones were so close together as to scarcely be seen at all. Almost 400 years later, another famous scholar traveled to Egypt, Diodorus Siculus, who wrote that the Great Pyramid was indeed covered in beautiful white casing blocks. He further remarked that the structure possibly lacked a capstone, too. A few decades after Diodorus, the historian Strabo visited Giza in 24 BC and was struck by the enormity of the magnificent building. He too claimed that the monument was encased in white casing stones. Strabo wrote that the Great Pyramid was like a building let down from heaven untouched by human hands. 3. This is a startling statement, for in his days the structure was already over 27 centuries old. Strabo also wrote that the Egyptian priests knew of a secret door into the monument, a curiously hinged door disguised among the casing blocks on the north face of the structure that led into a descending corridor. Though this entrance has been rediscovered, there is evidence that the Egyptians had long before forgotten where it was located. This evidence is in the fact that there has never been found any authentic ancient Egyptian writings, relics, or objects inside the Great Pyramid. This is a topic for a later section. That the secret entrance could have been easily lost is now known because of its obscure placement on the north face, high up on the sloping face and not centered so as to prevent detection. Evidently, the priests for a long time passed down the tradition of the secret entrance, though they had lost its location. The Egyptians also told Herodotus that there was a chamber below the pyramid that would fill up with water from the Nile, but this, too, is but an elder knowledge passed down from earlier times when the secret door's location was known. As will be shown, many pyramid building cultures preserve this knowledge that a well or water source lied beneath the structure. Strabo's observation concerning the pyramid's appearance as a building let down from heaven is a very accurate description of the optical illusion created by the size of the monument when viewed from a great distance. Long ago, when it was covered by the gleaming white limestone amid a barren landscape of desert yellow and brown, the heat of the daytime sun on the dead earth visibly obscured the lower portions of the monument. Far away, the pyramid appeared to be floating above the solid earth, disconnected to it. As one drew closer to the structure, it would literally descend onto the plateau until the observer was close enough that he could see that it was indeed firmly set upon the ground. The highly polished and precision-placed white casing blocks and the nearby reservoirs of water channeled in from the Nile amplified the effect. Pilgrims and visitors were always amazed to discover that the mountain they witnessed from such great distances was actually covered in innumerous smooth white stones, seemingly appearing as if they were one gigantic rock. From even up close, the Great Pyramid once looked like it was all hewn from a single immense white stone. 4. Before the Diluvian catastrophe that ended the ancient world, the geographical area of what was to become Egypt was the center of knowledge, learning, and Sethite civilization in the world. Knowledge, learning, and Sethite civilization. In a unique parallel, after the flood, this region again became the center of knowledge, shrouded in the most arcane mysteries. The Sethites encoded divine secrets into the architectural alignments inside and outside the Great Pyramid, the lesser structures, the Sphinx, and huge temples. They inscribed myriads of texts upon its surface and also concealed an ancient library of important writings below the Giza plateau. Though the Egyptian people had been conquered by Amalekites, by Hittites, Amorites, Babylonians, Assyrians, Elamites, all through their history, the Nile civilization was still venerated for having cultural centers of learning in their various temple cities that had no parallels in the rest of the Near East and Mediterranean worlds. This status remained true even until the Macedonian occupation of Greece, Asia Minor, the entire Eastern Mediterranean, Persia, and Egypt. Egypt, as a center of learning, flourished under the Ptolemies, also Macedonian, and after Alexander the Great became king of Greece. Tyre, Babylon, Persia, and Egypt, the city of Alexandria, was constructed on the Mediterranean and made famous for its incredible library that housed over 500,000 texts and records. Alexandria became a cosmopolitan admixture of Egyptian, Ionian Greeks, Romans, Syrians, Carthaginians, Persians, Jews, people from India, and even Romanized or Grecanized Celts and Gauls. Strabo studied there among the halls of 750,000 texts, all very meticulously numbered and cataloged according to Manly P. Hall in his thought-provoking Wisdom of the Knowing Ones. 5. Many of the writings preserved in the halls of Alexandria were actually old cosmographies and writings copied from copies, translations of translations that find their ultimate origin as tiny inscriptions once adorning the lower casing stones of the Great Pyramid. An entire archive later in this book has been devoted to show this. These writings were translated and copied during the life of Abraham, holy scriptures and books of wisdom and prophecy preserved by various cultures and known today as the religious writings of dozens of archaic cultures around the world. The Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus, a Greek by birth, 4th century AD, wrote about the Great Pyramid, claiming that its builders knew of a great flood coming on the world, so they dug out deep fissures to preserve the memory of their ceremonial knowledge. 6. His statement was not novel, but the general consensus of all Alexandrian scribes who had access to histories and chronologies of the world no longer extant. It was at Alexandria where scholars produced, through patient labor, the famous Septuagint translation of the Book of Moses in the 3rd century BC. These was the books Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. By the 2nd century AD, they had completed a translation of the entire Old Testament into Greek. Later, the Romans destroyed much of the library, but Mark Antony, famed lover of Queen Cleopatra, built the library of Pergamene at Alexandria afterwards, which held over 200,000 texts. 7. Many since then are responsible for the library's ultimate demise, from invasions of Romans, Visigoths, Christian religious purgings and fanaticism, and even Muslim occupation of the city. During these tumultuous times, many of the texts were secreted away by land and sea to reappear in hundreds or thousands of personal caches and smaller libraries in Europe, Asia, and Arabia. The scholars of the Arabians that filtered into Egypt to study the pyramids and their later counterparts also left us records of their findings that verify the observances made by the older Greek and Roman writers. The Mazudi left us the Coptic traditions of Surid, Enoch, studied earlier concerning the building of the pyramids. However, this scholar also conducted his own research of the Giza site. Masudi's manuscript is preserved in the British Museum as document 9575, which tells that the faces of the Great Pyramid were inscribed with unknown and unintelligible writings of people and nations of forgotten antiquity, a fact corroborated by the writings of Ibn Huqal. 8. Another Arab historian, whose name has been lost to us, recorded that the surfaces of the two gigantic pyramids at Giza were covered in inscriptions from top to bottom, and that the lines of text were very close together but nearly erased with time. He claimed that the meanings of the writings upon the casing stones was not known. 9. Such an admission conveys that the inscriptions were very old because the Arab scholars at this time were among the world's intelligentsia, versed in Aramaic, Coptic, Hebrew, Latin, Syrian, Greek, and some even studied ancient cuneiform and hieroglyphics. Being unable to translate a script is one thing, but not being capable of even identifying the writings is quite another, a fact indicating that the inscriptions upon the Great Pyramid were of one of the truly ancient languages, probably Sumerian. As will be seen in this book, there is a considerable amount of evidence that the Great Pyramid was indeed covered in Sumerian pictographs, which were translated after the flood in the days of the patriarch of biblical fame called Abraham. Tiny inscriptions grouped in lines close together over all four faces of the Great Pyramid, possibly over the surfaces of the other pyramid as well, would be the most extensive ancient library in the world, the largest book on earth. Had these writings been in any known post-Diluvian language, then there would have been many accounts of their contents. Even the Arab chronicler Makrizi wrote that it was not known who built these monuments, and he wrote that everything connected to them was mysterious. The traditions respecting them were various and contradictory. 10. These are the records of respectable historians regarding the writings of Giza. These men saw these monuments as they were intended to be seen, and they are to be envied for this privilege. What we behold at Giza today is not comparable to the awe-inspiring majesty of the sight they had witnessed. Later historians tell us why.